your Bibles, turn with me to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter number 2. We talked about this over the last 2 Sundays. Dakota was actually scheduled to preach this morning, and he told me, he said, Daddy, I really think you need to stay in the vein of where you're going. 2 weeks ago today, the Lord spoke to me on my way to church and asked me a simple question. And I heard T.D. Jakes make this statement, and I'm just going to share with you. Nobody else has to believe in your calling, but you do. Nobody else has to believe in your anointing, but you have to believe in it. Nobody has to believe in your ability, but if you're not convinced you're called, then chances are nobody else is going to be convinced of your call. If you're not convinced of your talents, then nobody else is going to be convinced of your talent. We talked about some of the things that we are going to have to overcome, and I'm going to talk about that this morning. But the Lord spoke to me 2 weeks ago this morning on my way to church, and I was completely planned on preaching something else, and I heard this as audible in my spirit as I've ever heard anything. He said, how do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? Go to Matthew chapter 16, please, verse 13. Before we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 2. How do you see yourself? That sounds simple. But if you don't see yourself as, what's this phrase? How many of you would say with me, I'm a child of God? Okay, well, let me back up and try to replant that again. How many of you would say, I am a child of God? I have been born again by the Spirit. I'm a child of God. Well, if you are a child of God, should we not be convinced that we live in another kingdom? We're not to participate as much in this earthly kingdom as we are heaven's kingdom. What's this? We shouldn't be as involved in this earth's economy as we are in the kingdom's economy. So now if you begin to see yourself, Revelation, we know Revelation chapter 5 says it like this, or chapter 1 verse 5, said he washed us from our sins in his own blood, verse 6, and hath made us kings and priests. Right? If you don't see yourself as a king, let me tell you what happens. You'll go through your life always feeling like you are less qualified than what you really are. Matthew chapter 16 verse 13, Jesus, we talked about this a number of times. When Jesus came to Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Now follow this. How many of you know that he knew that he was the Son of God? There was no question in Jesus' mind that he was the Son of God. Matthew introduces him as the Son of Man, but Mark introduces him as the Son of God. So when Jesus asked the question, he said, who do men say that I, and then he puts this in because people recognize if I see Bert, it's hard for me to see the Jesus in Bert for seeing Bert himself. But when Jesus asked the question, he said, whom do men say that I, comma, the Son of Man, am? Verse number 14. They said, some said, thou art John the Baptist, some Elijah, some Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. Jesus said, but whom do you say that I am? Now what's this? Those on the outside of our, I'm fixing to use a word that you're going to get to hear a lot late in the next few months. But those on the outside of our camp, it don't matter what they think about us, but it matters what we think about us. It don't matter what they're saying about us. We've been accused of being heretics. We've been accused of being cultish. We've been accused of being everything in the country. And it don't matter what they're saying, but we need to become convinced internally that we are sons and daughters of the Most High God. Now, when we understand that there's some things that goes along with being a child of God or a son of God or a daughter of God, and it's more than just coming to church and being religious. Can I go ahead and plug with this? Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elijah, some Jeremiah, one of the prophets. And Jesus said, but who do you say that I am? What's the next verse? And Peter, how many of you have ever had a revelation? An epiphany moment. I laughed several months ago. Brother Terry was here, and we was in service, and all of a sudden, he had a God encounter. And his statement was, he said, it scared me. And he left, he walked out. He walked out of the sanctuary, went to the kitchen. He said, I was shaking all over because I had a God encounter. And then Jesus says something like this. And Peter stands up and says, thou art the Christ. Now, I'm fixing to get real dramatic with this because I want you to get the emphasis. He's sitting there. Jesus asks the question, who do men say that I am? And then Peter's sitting there. All of a sudden, it hits him. He stands up and proclaims, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. I know who you are. And Jesus spins around, looks at him, and he said, blessed are you, Simon, for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. And upon this rock, what rock is this? We talked about it 100 times. What rock is this? The revelation of who Jesus is. Not on Peter's teaching, not on Peter's doctrine, but on what the revelation that Peter had, that Christ was the Son of God. And Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now what's this? The very next verse he said, and I will give to you the keys of the kingdom. Now how many of you know, if you don't know that you are part of a kingdom, you have no need for the keys? If you don't know what's in that kingdom room, then there's no need of you having the keys to get in that room if you don't really believe you're part of that kingdom. Now, let me move on. Go to the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter number 2, please. Verse number 6. We'll pick it up, verse number 6, and it's going to look like it's out of place, but it's very much in place. Howbeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor the prince of the world that come to naught. Next verse. We're going to read through verse number 10. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery. Now watch this. Even the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory. Next verse. Which none of the princes of this world had known. For had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, how many of you have ever heard this? And I shared this last week. We read this a lot at the graveside of a loved one going home. Talking about there's something on the other side of death's door that is, we've never seen it before. This was not talking about death. This was not talking about death and when somebody passes away. But as it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. Would you not say that that's us, right? How many of you know what we're supposed to be living in? It's easy for me to say we're supposed to be living in the kingdom. Does anybody here know fully what that means? I don't, but I'm on a quest to find out. Okay, I'm on a quest to find out. But as it is written, eyes not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. The next verse said, but God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit, for his Spirit searches all things, yea, the deep things of God. So you may not know what the kingdom is, but God, what part of what I was reading about Peter, part of that was that God is wanting to reveal it to us. He revealed to Peter that he was the Christ, the Son of the living God, but he wants to reveal to us that we are more than just bastard children, that we have been bought and purchased and born again into another kingdom. Okay? Now what's this? Go to the book of Numbers, and I'm going to fast forward and get into what I want to talk about today. We started talking about this last week. Numbers chapter 13, and pick it up at verse number 17, please. Actually, you pick it up about verse number 14, I think it is. Go to verse 17. Let's start there, 17. And Moses sent them to spy out the land. Anybody remember this story? That how many spies was it? We talked about this, right? There were 12 spies. So God sent them out to spy out the land. There was 12 total, but there were 2 out of that group, Joshua and Caleb, We know the story of Joshua and Caleb, right? We understand that they came back with a positive report. Now watch what he said. Then Moses sent them out to spy out the land of Canaan. Underscore the word Canaan, because that's one of the ites you will have to conquer before you move into your promised land. And said to them, go ye up this way southward. Watch this. Moses begins to give specific direction, right? We talked about this the other day. He begins to give specific direction. He's not going to tell you to do something and then not tell you how to do it. This past May, let me stop and incorporate this. This past May, I had the privilege of going to the Ark, to see the Ark. All my life, I was told that Noah, watch out, I have Moses build an ark, had Noah, that God spoke to Noah and told him to build an ark. All my life, I was taught that Noah didn't know what he was doing. He was just going by an instruction from God. It's what I've heard all my life. Come to find out, God had already put it in the heart of Noah to learn shipbuilding. He had worked in a long-term shipbuilding operation before God ever spoke to him. Follow this. God's not going to call you to do something that's outside of your gifting. God's not going to call you to do something that is foreign to you, something that you're going to bring an embarrassment on you and him. He's not going to do that. He's going to find out what your gifting is, and he's going to call you concerning your gifting, and not do something that's going to cause you to embarrass him and his kingdom. I didn't know that. But not only was Noah trained in shipbuilding, so was his sons. Anyway, make a long story short. So when God begins to call him, watch what happened. He says when Moses began to send them out to spy out the land, he said, there's a certain way you need to go, because how many of you know God knew what was on the other side of the mountain? This is going to sound so simple, but God knows what's on the other side of your instruction when you don't. Well, I can prove this. How many of you know when God spoke to Abram and told him to go up and offer Isaac, Abram could see was he was going to have to slay his son. But God said at the same time Abram was going up one side of the hill with Isaac, there was also a ram coming up the other side, but he didn't see it. I feel the Holy Ghost in here. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when God gives you an instruction, you never walk by what you see. You walk by the instruction that you know that you heard from God. And when you get to where you're supposed to be, there's something that God has already prepared for you there. There's something that God has already prepared for you there. Is this making sense? Let me ask this. Is this making sense? Now watch what he said. He said, and Moses sent them up, and he said, go up this way southward and go up into the mountain. Next verse. I can get hung up in that. And see the land, what it is, and the people that dwell therein, whether they be strong or weak, whether they be few or many, whether the land that they dwell in, whether it be good land or bad land, what cities they be that they dwell in, whether in tents or strongholds. That word stronghold actually means a fortified city. Either they live in pup tents or they live in fortified cities. He said, you go tell me. And what the land is, whether it be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not, and be ye of good courage. Now watch this. Anytime God speaks to you and tells you to be of good courage, you fix to have the faith fight of your life. The moment he says to you, be of a good courage, you might as well get ready to put your dukes up, because you fix to fight one hell of a fight. Right. Well, I don't believe that. Go ahead. Let me tell you what happened during that revival with D.R. Harrison. In his 16th week on a Tuesday night, he was preaching, and right in the middle while he's preaching, a 41, 42-year-old man falls out with all the symptoms of a stroke. Now, most of us have this idea, well, that's good, so God called this and he's going to do it. Don't think for a moment when God calls you to do something, you ain't going to have your adversaries to fight too. Don't think for a moment when God tells you to do something, you're not going to have some devils to fight. It took him weeks and weeks and weeks to get over the symptoms of an obvious stroke or a blood clot. His statement was, and I read on his blog this morning, he said, the enemy tried to take me out, but he should have done it while he had me down, because I'm back with a vengeance. How many of you have ever had anybody that you could knock them down, but you couldn't knock them out? How many of you are one of those that you can knock down, but you can't knock out? Now, what the land is, whether it be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not, and you be of good courage and bring the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. Now that don't sound like I'm saying anything. The first fruits of the grapes. Now most of you go to Walmart. We look for the little green grapes or little red grapes with the seeds in it. How many of you like seedless grapes? I was told when you get false teeth, you really look for the seedless. But you go in and we find grapes. And they're about this big around. If you get real blessed, you might can find them the size of a quarter, maybe. But when they came back, they had grapes the size of grapefruits. And they was hanging on a pole between Joshua and Caleb. And I'm convinced the pole was bending with the weight of the grapes. Now watch what he said. He said, the time is the time of the first ripe grapes. Next verse. So they went up and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin and Rehob, and men came to Hamath. Next verse. And they ascended by the south. Watch this, look at me. They ascended by the south right way. Everything they were supposed to see, they seen it given by the instruction of Moses. They ascended by the south and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Shishai, Talmai, the children of Anak were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Next verse. And they came to the brook of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with one cluster. Somebody shout, one cluster. Help me out. One cluster. Of what? Grapes. And they buried between two on a staff, and they brought of pomegranates and of figs. Next verse. The place was called the brook of Eshcol because the cluster of grapes which the children of Israel had cut down from thence. Next verse. And they returned from searching the land after 40 days. How many of you know after a 40-day visit, you ought to pretty much know some stuff about the place? Next verse. And when they went and came to Moses and to Aaron. Now watch this. They went to those who had an obvious anointing for leadership. There's a message laying right there. You don't take what God has given you and just share it with anybody. You let those who have the anointing to judge it. Amen. Do you follow that? The worst thing in the world for me to do is to go to Dakota if he's not been gifted in the gift of leadership and present my plan to him of leadership. If he don't have the gift of it, the first thing he's going to do is give me his opinion rather than what he perceives God saying. This is good church instruction right here. I don't know if you know that or not. This is real good church instruction. And they went and came to Moses and Aaron, the ones with the anointing for leadership, and all the congregation of the children of Israel. Now what's this? The problem with them coming before Moses and Aaron, there was no problem there, but they didn't need the children of Israel in there at that moment. I'm going to say something that's going to sound clannish and it's going to sound secretive, and I don't mean it that way. But there comes a time when you just need to talk to those who are in leadership position, and you don't need to bring everything you're doing before the whole church.
Right, sir. Right. Yes, sir.
Absolutely, it's wisdom.
Yes, sir.
And to all the congregation of the children of Israel under the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh, and brought back word to them, and to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit. Every time you see, and to all the congregation, let me tell you this, there's no way, I don't care how charismatic a preacher is, he's not going to get everybody in the congregation 100% on board with him. It ain't going to happen. I wish we could, but the truth is we're not. But if you can get the leadership to believe in the direction of the church, the leadership then will begin to influence the people. What would have happened had they left the congregation out and they went in and talked to Moses and Aaron? What would have happened? What would have been the outcome? Would have been a completely different story. The book of Numbers would have been completely different. And to the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. What's this? Verse 27. And they told them and said, we came into the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it flowed with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. So what's this? Moses, everything that we thought was in the promised land, this is the fruit of it. It's obvious that that's what it was. Next verse. Nevertheless, look at me, a faith destroyer. Well, I'm fixing to do this. A destiny murderer. When they used the word nevertheless, it was almost like, this is the fruit, but it don't mean anything. This is what was going on. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in that land. How many of you know it's easy to start talking about what you see rather than what you know? I'm going to say that again. I'm not moved by what I see. I'm moved by what I believe. I believe that God says, and therefore it is. Whether I see it or not, that ain't got nothing to do with it. Preacher, can you prove that? I thought you never would ask. How many of you know that there was one by the name of Thomas, one of Jesus' disciples? Anybody remember reading about him? Anybody ever heard about him? He's the one we preached and condemned for years, but the church is just like him, and we don't want to acknowledge that. Do you remember when he made the statement? He made the statement of his own will. He said, I will not believe unless I see with my own eyes. Now what's it? When he said I will, that was an act of his will. I don't believe things because Papa and Mama taught me to believe it. I believe things because I choose to believe. I will not believe unless I see the nail prints in his hand. And unless I see the holes in his side, I will not believe. And Jesus looks at him and said, come here, Thomas. Put your finger in the holes of my hand. He said, here, Thomas, take your hand and thrust into my side. He said, you believe because you have seen, but blessed are those who see not and yet believe. So we walk by what we see, or we walk by what we know. And this is exactly what the children of Israel. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in that land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. Next verse. The Amalekites dwelled in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwelled in the mountain. And the Canaanites dwelled by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And what's this? Go back one verse, please. Go back to verse 29. What's this? Every one of the ites had an assigned territory. I'm preaching to you right here. Every one of the ites had an assigned territory. How many of you know you can be in one place and have one spiritual warfare, and you can start into another town and have another spiritual warfare that you've never even seen coming? You know why? Spirits are territorial. Spirits are territorial. What's what I'm about to say? The Amalekites dwelled in the land of the south. They got the south border covered. The Hittites and the Jebusites, Amorites, they dwelled in the mountains, so they got the mountains covered. And the Canaanites dwelled by the sea, by the coast of Jordan. If you're going to do anything by the sea, you got to first go through the Canaanites. Next verse. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, ho, ho, whoa, stop. Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Now, most of us, the problem with trying to preach this is everybody knows the story. But what would have happened had Joshua and Caleb gone to Moses and Aaron and convinced them that they could have took it? What's this? The anointing that was on Moses and Aaron could have imparted it to the congregation. They could have come in and took the walled cities. Go please to the book of Psalms chapter number 1. Psalms chapter number 1, verse number 1. Blessed is the man that does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in that law does he meditate both day and night. Go back to verse 1. Blessed is the man that does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. If God has spoke something to you, please hear me this morning. I'm not just trying to preach a sermon. I'm trying to impart a word. If God has given you an instruction, do not go to anybody else that has not had the anointing of God put on their life to judge it. Do not go to them and let them judge your calling.
Amen. That's right. Amen. Very clear.
If they've not been anointed to judge your calling, don't pass your calling by them. Go back to Numbers, please. 13, verse 20, verse whatever it is. 29, that's what it is, verse 29. I knew I just said if y'all was on board with me. Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let me say this real quick. One of the things I learned as an evangelist, I'm not as interested in trying to minister to the congregation as I am ministering to that pastor. If I can touch the pastor, he can touch the congregation. I just preached you a principle right there. If Caleb and Joshua could have, by chance, gotten to Moses and to Aaron, they would have not had all the doubt and unbelief. Well, preacher, it was the 10, that didn't see it. Joshua and Caleb was the most influential out of that group of 12. Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we were well able to overcome it. How many of you know that is a mouthful right there? We were well able to overcome it. Next verse. But the men that went up with them said, we be not able to go up against the people, for they're stronger than we. How many of you know that would have been a real good place to pull out a pine knot and knock all 10 of them in the head right there? I mean, that would have been a wonderful place to have thrown them back behind the brush pile somewhere. Let me tell you, it don't take everybody. All it takes is one or two sowing seeds of discord and doubt to divide something up.
Amen.
We'd be able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. Go back one verse, please. I'll go back to verse 31. What's this? What would have happened had they said, we'd be able, and leave the word not out, we'd be able to go up against the people, for we are stronger than they. It would have changed the whole dynamics. Verse 31. 32. They brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land though which we have gone to search is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. Excuse me. Say what? It all come down to the way the children of Israel sing themselves. The 10 spies sing themselves. Well, they come in and they devour their inhabitants. Next verse. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. Them some guns is 8 and 9 foot tall. Look at me. The bigger they are, the harder they hit the ground. I ain't talking to the right group here. The bigger they are. How many of you, years ago, and now I'm officially getting real transparent. Years ago, I was at school and there was a guy decided they was going to fight, so they was going to get out behind the, certain building there at school, and they was going to fight. And this little fellow was about this tall. I say little fellow, he's pretty good size, about this tall. He was going to fight a guy about this tall. The one this tall was mucho big. country vernacular, he was a humdinger. And the old boy walked up, he was going to do some damage. He was going to sucker punch him and get the first one. He ran it back, he hit that big old boy. And that guy just looked at him and done this. I looked at him and I said, "You in trouble?" I had an epiphany moment. The little fellow was in trouble because he just hit the big fella and didn't knock him down. You'll get the moral of that story next Tuesday. They brought up an evil report. We searched the land. The land that, though which we have gone into to search it, is a land that eats up its inhabitants. And all the people there are, I'm talking about, they big. Next verse. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight. This is what I wanted to get to you. We were in our own sight. Didn't say they seen us that way. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so were we in their sight. The people of all the ites never said they seen them as grasshoppers. Do you follow the story? They never said they seen the other people, the children of Anak never said we see the children of Israel as grasshoppers, but the children of Israel was thinking everybody else seen them that way because that's the way they seen themselves. I started to leave the house this morning. Angela was doing her hair, and I started to leave the house this morning, and when I started to walk out the door, the word of the Lord come to me. And I looked at her, I said, I see myself preaching to thousands. Well, preacher, where they at? I said, I see myself preaching to thousands. If I can't see it in here, I'll never see it out here. If you're sick and you need healing, as long as you focus on your sickness, you'll never see yourself healed. But the moment you see yourself, I feel the Holy Ghost within. The moment you see yourself walking in divine health, the moment you see that diverticulitis is gone and you can return back to eating just like you want to, the moment you envision it on the inside of it, the anointing on the inside of you begins to drive that out. Oh, son. We're in our own sight. It's great. Now, what's this? Let's change the dynamic. There we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants. And when they seen us as giants. They seen us bigger than them, because if God be, then who in the world can be against us? So greater is he that is than he that is in the world. Now, let me hit this real quick, and I'm going to try my best to hurry. I can talk with 500 words a minute. We've gushed up to 750. What's this? I'm going to just hit this real quick. We talked a little bit about this. We talked about two of these last week and introduced the third one. I'm going to hit them real quick. Somebody thought, oh, he's fixing to leave. No, we ain't. Amalek. Somebody say Amalek. The Amalekites. What's this? The word Amalek itself represents pure, unadulterated evil. It represents those who have given themselves over to the dark side of impurity. Steve and myself were talking about a guy years ago who was a serial killer by the name of Ted Bundy. Some of y'all may have remembered reading about him, hearing about him. I want to share something with you. Steve said during this interview that they done with Ted Bundy, said one of the questions was, basically, what caused you to do what you do? I mean, what would be on the inside of a mind that would kill multiplied people? And he said one of the things that every corrupt, twisted mind would do was feed itself with pornography. When you start feeding your mind with that kind of impurity from the dark side, after a while you can't judge the difference in reality and fantasy. The Amalekites is ones who gave themselves over to the dark side of impurity. Watch this. Go to Deuteronomy 25, verse 17, please. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 17 through 19. I'm going to hit this real quick. And I want to speak this prophetically to you. If you've ever had to overcome the sin of impurity, pornography, lust, homosexuality, it makes no difference. If you'll remember what Amalek did unto you, by the way, when you were come forth out of Egypt, next verse, how he met you by the way and smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, and when thou wast faint and weary, he feared not God. Next verse. Therefore it shall be when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about. You're going to have to fight him. I'm just telling you. You're going to have to fight him. It may not be you personally, but you're going to have to deal with people that have been in bondage to pornography, that has been in bondage to impurity, that has been in bondage. Let me tell you this. We don't like it, but how many of you know? The truth is, those that are acting out as though they're homosexuals, it is absolutely a delusion in their mind that they think that's what they are. All they need to do is be confronted with the truth. Well, I don't know. All right, well, let me tell you this. Your judgmentalness is going to keep you from the things of the kingdom anyway. I'm ready to see some folks get born again. There's a guy that lives in Covington. If I called his name, I'm sure my sister-in-law would know exactly who he was. One of the best piano players you've ever heard in your life. I'm talking about could rock the house playing the piano. And he and his wife started having problems, and he went to a UPC church. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you choose to do. Was going to a UPC church. Him and his wife started having problems. So instead of the pastor counseling with them, he tells him, he said, I want you to get up in front of the church and confess your faults. How many of you know there's a time and a place for that? He stands up and starts talking about how him and his wife was going to stand up and tell about how him and his wife was having problems and was asking for reconciliation. And before long, he said he had failed the second time, and he told him, he said, I'm not doing that anymore. And he started living a life of lasciviousness, and before long, he was in full-blown homosexuality. Now let me tell you something. Some of you not going to agree with this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If he was to get born again and delivered, some of you might not would sit here long enough to hear it. But if he got born again and delivered, I would have absolutely no problem having him on the platform, helping us lead worship. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I done jumped out there anyway. I'm going to say it. Some of our greatest praise and worship leaders right now, our singers and our dancers are dancing in topless bars because the church has refused to accept their differences. Can I go on with the story about R.T. Harrison? You ready for this? He had become an alcoholic. When he found his wife, you ready for this? He found his wife. They married, both of them living in ultimate sin. She was an adult entertainer. She was into drugs, she was into alcohol, she was into illicit sex, she was into it all. And he said, the moment we got born again, watch this, we didn't just get born again, we got delivered. Now she's one of his greatest assets. Look at me. We don't like that because I don't want that kind of stuff in our church. Such were some of us. Had it not been for the grace of God, we could have been the same thing, doing the same thing, or even worse. Preacher, I just don't know if that's what you're going to do in that church. I think I'm going to go ahead and pull states. As the old timers would say, osteo la vista. And I don't know if you've gotten a letter from me lately, but there's something that's tearing me up. Is the realization that the only thing I'm going to take from this planet with us when we go to heaven is the souls that we have won to Christ. That's it. That's it. I'm telling you, John Johnson, I'm getting passionate about it. Getting passionate about it. And it shall come to pass when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about, in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it. What's it? You're going to have to face some things to get your land. It's not just because you go in and claim it, name it, claim it, blab it, and grab it. You have to fight to get some of it. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Thou shalt not forget it. In other words, everything he ever done, there's going to come a time, once God has given you rest and you wipe him out, it's going to be, what devil? Amalek who? Oh, we wiped him out years ago. He has nothing to do with where I'm at. I'm going to hit this real quick. Now, number 2. Somebody shout Hittites. Hittites. How many of you ready for me to shut down? Thank you. Hittites comes from a word meaning terror, dread, or fearfulness. Dread, terror, or fearfulness. How many of you have ever had God to ask you to do something and the first thing you've done just start falling apart? The first thing happens, and I'm going to deal with this. I don't want to speak to your mind. I want to speak to your spirit. The first thing happens is the enemy throws up how inadequate you are. He throws up your garbage from the past. Me stand up and tell my story in the church, them people's going to laugh at me. What is that? That's fear of an unforgiven past. If your past has been forgiven, howbeit for David or Dakota or Greg or anybody else to drag your past up. It's quiet here, but I'm telling you, this is good instruction right here. Dread, terror. Ask you a question. What is the one thing that almost immobilizes you when you think about doing it? Let me tell you something. My father-in-law was as good a guy as you'd ever want to lay eyes on. You get him up in front of the church to sing, he can sing like a bird. You ask him to pray over the offering, he fall apart. Had a terrifying fear of saying anything. You hit a piano chord or you hit a guitar chord, he'd sing like a hummingbird. There was a fear. He'd get up and it was almost like just a paralyzing fear. He couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. When God first called me to preach, I'm going to be honest with you, I looked at heaven and I laughed. I thought it was funny. I thought God was pulling a joke. You want me to do what? God, I'd fall apart when I had to stand up and give a book report at school. I'm going to stand up and do what? I don't like church folk, God. Oh, y'all missed that. Y'all better thank God I love you now. But that was the day I didn't like it. If you went to church, I didn't like it. Church folk will hurt you. Church folk will devastate you. Somebody sent me something the other day. Said no one on this earth has ever been hurt more by church folk than Jesus has, yet he shows up every Sunday. Let me move on. What is it we're afraid of? What's this? The words fear not, used 300 times in the Bible. Fear stops you from inheriting the blessings of God. I'm going to say this. This is something that I'm just going to throw it out. Fear causes us to waste our time, energy, and resources. Fear. Genesis 3:10. Lord, I'm trying my best to hurry. Then we're going to go to Joshua 3:9 and we're going to quit. Under Moses' leadership, Israel was afraid to possess the land. I'm going to say this to you this morning. Will you receive something here from out of my spirit? We have nothing to fear. We have nothing to fear. Nothing. If God says, I'll be with you, then if we believe that, we have nothing to fear. He's with us. Genesis 3:10. You remember when Adam, after he and Eve had eaten from the tree, what was their daily routine with God? He would come down in the afternoon and walk in the cool of the day with him, right? They would have communion. They would have fellowship. What's this? I'm so convinced that during those moments, God was imparting into Adam how to run the garden and expand the garden to the point that it takes over the whole earth. It was times of impartation. It wasn't just times of fellowship. The Bible says, and they walked in the cool of the day and they had fellowship. I'm convinced it was times of impartation. And as soon as they ate the apple, we call it an apple, as soon as we eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, his eyes was open. That afternoon when God came to walk among them, what did Genesis 3:10 say? I heard thy voice in the garden, and the spirit of the Hittite came on me. I was naked and I hid myself. I was afraid to meet you, God. What's this? The spirit of the Hittite is, as soon as you start before God in your time of communion, the fear that maybe that sin is not forgiven. Maybe it's not forgiven. What's this? The moment you confessed it, as far as the east is from the west, so far he has removed my transgressions from me. What sins? You know that thing you did like what? But you did it like what? You know what you did? What? It's underneath the blood of the cross of Calvary, as far removed as the darkness is from dawn. In the sea of God's forgiveness, that's good enough for me. Well, praise God, my sins are gone. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Go to Deuteronomy now, quick. Either that or I'm sorry. Joshua chapter 3. If I don't, I'll be running out of notes. I've got about 5 or 6 pages of notes, and I'm just at the bottom part of a page and a half. Starting into the bottom part. Joshua 3, verse number 9. Isn't this a wonderful place to be? Come hither and hear the words of the Lord your God. How many of you know? And I'm not criticizing other churches, but not every church is going to hear the word of the Lord. Joshua said to the children of Israel, come hither and hear the words of the Lord your God. Verse number 10. And Joshua said, hereby you should know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. I'm going to read it again. Hereby shall you know that the living God is among you. You see, these ites drove out. I'm going to say this, and in closing. He didn't say, when I see you struggling with them, He said, when I see them drove out, Jesus went to pray for a blind man. I'm going to use you, brother. Went to pray for a blind man. What do you see? He opens his eyes. Could he see clear? No. He said, I see men as trees. Now what do you see? I can see. I see men as men. I'm not saying that there will come a time that you don't have to deal with people who are not seeing what you see. Just keep praying with them, because sooner or later, those ites is going to be driven out of your life. They're going to be driven out of your life. Fear? What do we have to fear? Nothing. What's stopping us from fulfilling our vision or our call? Us, not him. Us, not him. I introduced this one the other day. I'm going to just throw it out. Jebusites. Somebody said Jebusites. Means to be treading or trodden down. Anybody here ever had situations in life just keep beating you down? Every time you start to get up, I've heard this growing up, I make one step forward and two back. The whole object is for the enemy to destroy your faith in God. Makes you think you can't get a breakthrough. He is your breakthrough. He is your breakthrough.